At 64, I never imagined life would still have so many surprises for me. It was just another ordinary day on the farm, the kind that blended seamlessly with all the others. The sun hung high in the sky, its warm rays spreading across the fields, while a gentle breeze whispered through the air, calming my mind as I went about my chores. I'd lived on this farm for most of my life, ever since my husband passed away, and it had become my sanctuary, my place of comfort. But there was something different about today, something in the air I couldn't quite identify. My nephew Jimmy had been visiting for a while now, helping with the heavy tasks and making sure I was well taken care of. At 25, he was a strong, handsome young man with a charm that was impossible to ignore. It felt good to have him around. The company, the laughter, the shared meals. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed hearing another person's voice until he arrived. He was always so attentive, so kind, and though he was my nephew, I found myself looking at him longer than I should have. That day, we worked side by side in the barn, moving hay bales and feeding the animals. Sweat glistened on his forehead, his shirt clinging to his muscular frame. I noticed how effortlessly he handled the work, and there was something in the way he moved, confident yet gentle, that caught my attention. As he bent down to lift another bale, I couldn't help but admire his strength, the way his body seemed to flow with the natural rhythm of the work. My heart fluttered in a way I hadn't felt in years. We took a break, sitting on the edge of the old wooden fence, overlooking the fields. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange as the sun began to set, casting a soft glow over everything. Jimmy looked over at me, his eyes soft and filled with something I couldn't quite name. "You've done so much here, Aunt Sua," he said, his voice deep and sincere. "I don't know how you do it, day in and day out." I smiled, a little embarrassed by the compliment. "It's just life," I replied, brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "It's what I know." Jimmy leaned in a little closer, his arm brushing against mine. The warmth of his skin sent a shiver down my spine, and for the first time, I became acutely aware of how close we were. His gaze lingered on mine, and in that moment, something shifted. The way he looked at me wasn't the way a nephew looks at his aunt. It was something deeper, something that made my pulse quicken. There was a heavy silence between us, full of unspoken words. I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension, but I couldn't. My mind raced, my heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't felt this alive in years. Then, as if he'd read my thoughts, Jimmy gently placed his hand on mine. His touch was electrifying, sending waves of warmth through my body. "Ansua," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know how to say this, but I've been feeling something I can't ignore." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. His eyes locked with mine, intense, full of emotion. "I know we're family, but I've been drawn to you in a way I can't explain," Jimmy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think about you all the time. Your laugh, the way you carry yourself. There's something about you, Sua. Something that makes me feel things I've never felt before." I was speechless. How could this be happening? How could my own nephew, this young, vibrant man, be saying these things to me? And yet, as I looked into his eyes, I realized that I felt the same way. The feelings I had been trying to suppress, trying to ignore, were bubbling to the surface, undeniable and impossible to contain. "Jimmy, I started, but my words faltered. "I don't know what to say." He gently squeezed my hand and replied softly, "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to tell you." For a long moment, we sat there in silence, his hand still resting on mine. The sun had sunk below the horizon, leaving the world bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The only sound was the rustle of the wind through the trees. My heart raced, my mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. There were still so many questions, so many things left unsaid, but for now, it didn't matter. All that mattered was this moment, this feeling, this new and unexpected chapter in my life. As Jimmy's hand found mine again, I realized that whatever came next, we would face it together. The days that followed felt surreal, as if the world outside the farm had disappeared, leaving just the two of us in a cocoon of feelings neither of us could fully explain. Jimmy continued helping with the chores, but now there was something unspoken between us. Every touch, every glance felt charged with electricity. It was as though we were walking on the edge of something dangerous and exhilarating all at once. One afternoon, we were working by the old apple trees on the far side of the farm, picking the last of the season's fruit. The sun was high, casting a golden light across the fields, and Jimmy stood beside me, his arms full of apples, his shirt clinging to his skin from the heat of the day. He caught me looking at him, and for a moment we both froze. The air between us was thick with tension, simmering with a desire neither of us could deny. Sua, he said softly, stepping closer. His voice was deep and husky. I can't stop thinking about you, about us. This is crazy, I whispered, my voice barely audible. We shouldn't be feeling this way. But he shook his head, his voice low and full of emotion. But we are, and I don't want to fight it anymore. Before I could respond, Jimmy closed the small distance between us, gently cupping my face in his hands. He leaned in, his lips brushing mine in the softest, most tentative kiss, like a question waiting to be answered. A surge of warmth spread through me, and in that instant, I forgot everything else. I forgot about the reasons we shouldn't, forgot about the world outside, and focused only on the feel of his lips on mine. The kiss deepened as his arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer. My hand slid up to his shoulders, feeling the strength of his body, and I kissed him back with a passion I hadn't known I still possessed. His lips were soft, warm, and tasted faintly of the apples we had been picking. I felt like I was melting into him, every touch, every movement sending shivers down my spine. We broke apart only when we were breathless, both of us standing there, hearts racing. I stared up at him, my mind spinning with the reality of what had just happened. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized that I didn't feel guilty or ashamed. I felt alive, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I don't want to stop, I whispered, surprising even myself with the intensity of my words. Jimmy's gaze softened, and he smiled at me in that way that made my heart skip a beat. Neither do I. He leaned in again, capturing my lips in another kiss. This time, it was more urgent, more intense. His hands roamed down my back, pulling me flush against him, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. My fingers tangled in his hair as our kiss deepened. The world around us slipped away until there was only him, only this moment. We lost track of time, standing there in the golden light of the late afternoon, kissing as though nothing else mattered. His kisses were a mixture of tenderness and hunger, as if he couldn't get enough of me. And I found myself responding with equal intensity. Every time our lips met, it felt like a spark igniting inside me, something long dormant coming to life once more. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, I rested my forehead against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath my cheek. His arms tightened around me, holding me close, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly safe. Later that evening, we sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jimmy's arm was draped casually over my shoulders, his fingers tracing soft circles on my skin. I leaned into him, resting my head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest. I don't know what the future holds, I said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, but I know that I don't want to face it without you. Jimmy turned to me, his eyes full of warmth and love. He reached up gently, tilting my chin so that our eyes met. His thumb brushed lightly over my bottom lip, sending a shiver through me. I feel the same way, he murmured, his voice low and intimate. I don't care about what anyone thinks. I just want to be with you. Without waiting for a response, he kissed me again, softly at first, then deeper. His lips moved against mine in a slow, sensual rhythm that made my heart race. His hand slid up to cradle the back of my head, holding me in place as his mouth explored mine. The kiss grew more passionate, more insistent, and I found myself responding, pressing closer to him, wanting more. His kisses were intoxicating, each one sending waves of warmth through my body. I felt his hand slide down my arm, his fingers brushing lightly against my skin, leaving a trail of goosebumps in their wake. His touch was gentle, but full of intent, and I knew that there was no turning back now. We had crossed a line, but it didn't scare me. It thrilled me. As the night went on, we found ourselves tangled in each other's arms again, this time with no hesitation, no second guessing. We kissed like we had all the time in the world, slow and deep, savoring every moment, every touch. His hands moved over me, exploring, caressing, and I knew that this was only the beginning. I could feel the heat building between us with each passing second. We spent the night together, wrapped in each other's warmth, our kisses growing softer, more languid as time wore on. Every time our lips met, it was as if we were sharing something deeper, something that went beyond words. His kisses told me everything I needed to know: that he wanted me, that he cared for me, that this wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was real, and it was ours. In the quiet of the night, as we lay there with our bodies entwined, Jimmy's lips found mine again, a soft, lingering kiss that felt like a promise. His hand gently cupped my face, his thumb brushing over my cheek as he kissed me tenderly, savoring every second. I kissed him back with the same tenderness, a sense of peace washing over me. "I'm glad we found each other," I whispered against his lips, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Jimmy smiled, his forehead resting against mine. "Me too, Swa, more than you know." For the rest of the night, we held each other close, exchanging soft kisses, sharing quiet moments in the warmth of my bed. Every touch, every kiss felt like a reassurance that this was right, that we had found something rare, something beautiful. And as I drifted off to sleep in his arms, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, hand in hand. The following days on the farm felt like something out of a dream. We continued our work, but now every moment was filled with subtle touches, shared smiles, and stolen kisses. Each time Jimmy passed by, his hand would brush mine, or he'd steal a quick kiss when no one was watching. The air between us was charged with a quiet passion that simmered just beneath the surface. One evening, after a long day of work, we decided to take a walk through the fields as the sun was setting. The cool breeze rustled the tall grass around us, and the sky was painted in vibrant hues of pink and orange. We walked hand in hand, the silence between us comfortable, filled with the kind of understanding that didn't need words. When we reached the top of the hill, Jimmy stopped, pulling me close. His arms wrapped around my waist, and he leaned in, capturing my lips in a slow, lingering kiss. The warmth of his body pressed against mine, the softness of his lips, the way his hands gently cradled my face, it was all perfect. Time seemed to stand still as we kissed beneath the fading light, the rest of the world melting away. "I love you," he whispered against my lips, his voice full of emotion. Tears welled in my eyes as I kissed him back, my heart swelling with happiness. "I love you too, Jimmy." And as we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, kissing under the setting sun, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The world might not have understood us, but we had found something special, something worth holding on to. In that moment, I knew that love, true love, was all that mattered. We returned to the farm that night, and Jimmy's lips lingered on mine. The warmth of his embrace made everything else fade away. In that moment, the world outside didn't exist. It was just the two of us, wrapped up in each other, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. His hands caressed my back, pulling me even closer as we stood there, kissing slowly, deeply, without hesitation. The passion between us simmered just beneath the surface, ready to spill over. "I don't want this night to end," Jimmy whispered, his voice low and full of desire. As he looked into my eyes, I felt the same. The connection we shared was undeniable, and I wanted nothing more than to let the night unfold without boundaries. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the pull between us growing stronger with every passing second. "Then don't let it," I whispered back, my voice soft but filled with meaning. Jimmy's gaze darkened with emotion, and without another word, he took my hand and led me back to the farmhouse. The walk felt long, each step filled with a growing sense of anticipation. Our hands intertwined, our bodies moving in sync. By the time we reached the front door, the night had fully settled in, the stars twinkling above us. But the quiet of the farm only heightened the intimacy between us. Once inside, Jimmy gently closed the door behind us, turning to face me. There was something unspoken in the way he looked at me, something deep, raw, and full of affection. He stepped forward, cupping my face in his hands, and kissed me softly at first, then more urgently. His kisses felt like promises, like confessions, and I returned them with equal intensity, my fingers slipping into his hair as I pulled him closer. We stumbled into the bedroom, our lips never parting, our bodies pressed together as the urgency between us grew. Jimmy's hands roamed over my body, his touch sending shivers through me, awakening feelings I hadn't felt in so long. His lips trailed down my neck, his breath warm against my skin, and I let out a soft sigh as the heat between us intensified. Clothes were discarded in a blur, and soon we were tangled in each other. Skin against skin, the world outside forgotten. His kisses became more demanding, more passionate, and I responded in kind. My hands explored the contours of his body, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength of his form. It was as if every barrier between us had disappeared, and we were free to lose ourselves in the moment. Jimmy's touch was gentle yet full of desire, his hands tracing the curves of my body with reverence. He kissed me deeply, his mouth moving in perfect rhythm with mine, and every kiss felt like it ignited something inside me, a flame that had long been dormant. I had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted like this, to be loved so completely. We moved together as if we had done this 1,000 times before, our bodies finding a natural rhythm. Our breaths became shallow as we lost ourselves in each other, consumed by the passion, by the love that seemed to bloom between us with every touch. Time and space disappeared, leaving only the two of us together in the warmth of our shared affection. His hands gripped my hips, pulling me closer, and I let out a soft moan as we became one. The world faded into nothing but sensation. It was slow at first, tender as if we were savoring every moment, every touch. But soon it became more urgent, more intense, driven by a need that neither of us could control. The night stretched on, and we spent it wrapped in each other, exploring, touching, kissing, doing everything a couple does when they're lost in the heat of the moment. Jimmy's whispered words of affection filled the air between us, his breath warm against my skin as he told me how much he wanted me, how much he cared for me. And I told him the same, my voice trembling with emotion as I admitted just how deeply I had fallen for him. We made love in a way that felt timeless, as if nothing else mattered but this moment, this connection. It was passionate and raw, yet filled with tenderness and love. Every kiss, every caress was a reminder that we had found something rare, something beautiful, and I cherished every second of it. Hours passed, but it felt like no time at all. Eventually, we lay there together, tangled in the sheets, our bodies still pressed close. His arm was wrapped around me as I rested my head on his chest. The rise and fall of his breathing was soothing, and I felt a deep sense of contentment settle over me. The night had been everything I hadn't known I was missing. I whispered softly, tracing lazy circles on his skin with my fingertips. Jimmy kissed the top of my head, his lips lingering there for a moment before he spoke. "Neither did I," he said quietly, his voice full of emotion. "But I'm glad we found each other." His words made my heart swell, and I couldn't help but smile. I looked up at him, our eyes meeting in the dim light of the room, and I knew that whatever lay ahead for us, we would face it together. There was no denying the bond we had formed, no going back from what we had shared. It was real, and it was ours. As the night wore on, we drifted off to sleep in each other's arms. The warmth of his body kept me safe, and his soft breathing lulled me into the most peaceful rest I had known in years. The future was uncertain, but I no longer feared it. I had found something unexpected, something beautiful in Jimmy's love, and it had brought me back to life in ways I couldn't have imagined. And as we lay there, entwined as lovers, I knew that no matter what anyone thought or what challenges we might face, we would face them together. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. I had found love again, and it was more than I ever could have hoped for.